Hey, it's Patrick from J&P Cycles. Today we're going to show you how to install an S&S Stealth Intake on our Milwaukee 8 Softail. This installation is basically going to be the same for all Milwaukee 8 Softails. In this specific one, we're going to be using this Teardrop style air cleaner. The first thing we have to do is get our stock air intake off here. And this bike has a 114 in it, so it's going to have this kind of football shaped air intake. You may have a 107 with the standard style cover on it, and so it's going to differ a little bit, but once it comes off, everything going back on will be exactly the same. So we're going to take an 1/8 inch Allen, pull these two screws out, and start to take our intake off. So underneath that little 114 cover is going to be 2 more Allens that are 5/32. And pull these breather hoses off. There's going to be 2 breather bolts in here. You're going to need a deep well 7/16 to pull those out. Next, we'll pull off these 3 Allen. These are 5/32 Allens, and then the whole base plate, the whole backing plate will come off. So if it's still hanging there when the screws are out, you might have to give it a little bit of a bump to get it loose. And there's a little bit of gasket material on here. We're gonna need to clean that off to make sure our new one seals tight up against there. So I'll get a razor blade and clean this up before we do our install. So the next thing we have to do is we have to get our backing plate ready. We're gonna add this little tab here. What this tab does is it helps cover up the big plug for your throttle wiring. If you look on the back of this, there's a hole and a little peg. The one hole goes over the peg, and then you take this little self-tapper screw, Phillips here, and run it into the other hole. What that's gonna look like when you're finished on the outside is that tab's gonna hang down there to cover that plug up. So this S&S plate is actually pretty trick. There's no crazy hoses or anything because it breathes through the plate. If you look inside these brass inserts here where your breather bolts go, there's a hole, and then you can see the hole dumps out here so it can breathe back in through the intake. Instead of having like crazy hoses running around or something, it's all done through the inside. Next thing we need to do is we need to take these 3 smaller screws that come with it. We're gonna put them through these brass holes here, and they won't drop right through. They thread through, and then they'll hit this shoulder here. So they're gonna thread through, and once they thread through, they won't fall out. They'll kind of fall through there, but then they won't fall out, and there's enough threads left over to go into the throttle body. When you get those 3 through there, we're gonna put some Loctite on those, and then we'll set up our breather bolts. S&S is nice enough to send some Loctite with it, so you don't have to go scrounging all over your garage. The other nice thing about those shouldered threaded bolts is there's no chance of them coming loose and getting sucked back into your engine. So next we're gonna get our breather bolts set up, and S&S sends 8 of these rubber coated washers. You're gonna put 1 on here like this, and then we're gonna put 1 on the back, on each one. And we're gonna wanna put just a little bit of Loctite on these. But we also have to get our O-ring in this groove. We're gonna put this all on at one time. Now, I like to put a little bit of grease in that groove right there to keep that O-ring from moving around. That'll hold it in there. A little dab of Loctite. And now we're gonna put the assembly on. We're gonna kind of start all these at the same time. You don't want to tighten any of them down just yet. Since those little bolts will kind of hold themselves in there, I like to start the breathers first. Once we get them started, our O-ring's sitting good in there, we'll start the little ones. We're gonna run these 5 32nd Allens down and torque them to 72 inch-pounds. Not foot-pounds, but inch-pounds. So now comes the part where we have these extra rubber-coated washers. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the gap between the backing plate and the head right here. And if this gap is thicker than one of these washers, we need to add the number of washers we need behind it. So you'd have to take this off, put the washer on, then torque this back down again. Now you can use a set of feeler gauges, or you can take a washer and try to slide it in there. If you can slide a washer in there, you need to use it. Most of the time, I'd say you probably aren't gonna have to use this. Both of ours, there's a little bit of gap that's gonna tighten up, but not enough of a gap to add a washer. So we don't need these. We're gonna take a 5/16 Allen and torque these down 10 to 12 foot-pounds. This is a foot-pound, not an inch-pound. So 10 to 12 foot-pounds on these. We're gonna torque these down, and then we'll get the filter and the cover on there. Now we'll get our filter and our cover and get them on. So our filter, of course, is a washable, reusable, what amounts to a lifetime filter, much more higher flow than the stock filter and certainly more durable. And as these get used, you can wash them out with warm soapy water, just let them air dry, never blow compressed air through these things, and you can always re-oil them. We sell the recharge kits, and these will last you a long, long time and work very well. If you're using the mini teardrop style cover, this is all it's gonna be. You see there's a little ridge in there. This cover is actually gonna fit down inside the ridge. We're gonna put this on, we're gonna Loctite, put some Loctite on our Phillips screws and run them down tight. If you're using the standard Stealth style cover, which is the black cover, you're gonna use it and then put whatever cover you want on. There's a million choices on those Stealths. You can use your stock cover, you can use one of the S&S round covers, and you'll do that. But ours, since we are using the mini teardrop style, we don't have that black piece. It just fits right up against here. So we're gonna Loctite our screws and run them in. You can feel this filter in there kind of compress down. You'll feel the screws bottom out. There's no torque spec on this because it's a Phillips. Once they bottom out, just give them a little bit of elbow grease. Don't get too crazy. And that'll be that. This is almost a must-do on a Harley these days, especially if you're looking to add an exhaust. You really need to add an intake like the Stealth here with the mini teardrop on it, because if you're gonna try to add that extra horsepower by getting that air out through the exhaust, you really need to get it in through an intake like this, not rely on the stock unit. And the question we always get asked is, do I need to add a fuel controller? And my answer is always yes. And I'm not just trying to sell you something. Even stock bikes benefit from fuel controllers. Something like an FP3 or a Power Vision, Power Commander, something like that is going to greatly improve the performance of not only the bike, but when you put something like this on it, it's going to make this piece work better as well. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a comment and go work on those motorcycles.